Hi, everybody, and welcome to Conversations with Dr. Jay Harness. I have a really special guest today, Dr. Dawn Mussallem, who is a consultant in the Division of Hematology and Oncology at the Mayo Clinic, Florida, and also an assistant professor of medicine. She is a doubly boarded lifestyle medicine specialist in breast disease. She has a really unique personal connection to her work as a stage 4 cancer patient, diagnosed, oh my word, diagnosed 3 months into medical school. And then subsequently, as part of her journey in 2021, became a heart transplant recipient. And she's going to tell us all about her journey. In 2015, she founded the Integrative Medicine Breast Health Program in Mayo Clinic, Florida. She is an internationally recognized keynote speaker and is active in medical education, which includes being the director of the Lifestyle Medicine Residency curriculum at the Mayo Clinic. So, Dawn, what a privilege it is to have you here today. Welcome.
Dr. Harness, thank you so much. I am really excited about being here today. And it's always such a privilege to be able to share this space with you and your viewers and listeners. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's our privilege. And by the way, and you probably may do the same thing, whenever I'd walk into a newly diagnosed patient, I looked them straight in the eye and said, "Hi, I'm Jay."
I
Shook
do the
their hand and then sat down. And I always sat down on the little roll around stool, so I was below them on the exam table. So they were, since I'm 6'1", so they were looking down on me, giving them that sense of empowerment. But anyway, it's a real treat to have you here. Now, Dawn, you and I, please call me Jay, you and I have a really unique connection because you're a Midwesterner like I am. I'm from the state of Michigan, and I spent 24 years at the University of Michigan for medical school training and faculty time. And you, my dear person, are from Columbus, Ohio. Oh my word. And you
Yes, go
went to,
Buckeyes.
yeah, surprise.
I
And
should
I
have
have,
won.
and I have lots of friends from Columbus, and I always tell them, now, you know what? I can talk to you 364 days out of the year. There's only one day out of the year I can't talk to you, and that's the day of the University of Michigan, the Ohio State
Yeah,
football game.
don't forget that yeah.
Oh, yes, that's really, really, really key. Well,
uh,
let's start off by talking about your, what I call antecedent story, because you, as you shared with me, you grew up with lots of energy and you had a major focus on activity, exercise, and nutrition. So let's give our audience your backstory. It's really important.
I actually went to naturopathic school before I went to traditional medical school.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that. Okay.
I did, yes. But the naturopathic school for me was quite limited. I knew it was just something I wanted to learn more about myself. I didn't think it was really going to be a true endpoint to my ultimate career goal. So I applied to one medical school. It was the osteopathic school in Arizona. And I selected that school because they had a robust, pretty, we could say like a holistic program. They had a lot of nutrition and they had a lot of the osteopathic modalities that they really
Yeah.
taught deeply to their students. So I went to medical school there, and you won't believe what happened. It was a few months into medical school, and the first time ever in my, 2.5 decades on the planet, I started not to feel good. I saw a doctor, and they said, it's probably adult asthma. Use an inhaler. They gave me an inhaler. Started using the inhaler, and I noticed my workouts were getting so difficult. I would
Wow.
climb Camelback Mountain in Arizona once or twice a day. I would go up, come down, and go right back up and come down and then go to medical school class. I couldn't even get up the first set of stairs to even start the mountain. What's happening here? Saw another doctor. He said, use the inhaler more. So I start using it more. And now my heart rate's racing. I see a third doctor. He says, oh, this is in your head. And during this time, not one of those doctors, you actually won't believe this when I tell you this, not one of them listened to my lungs, and not one of them ever did a chest x-ray. It was so weird. So, you know, shortly after that third doctor had seen me, I was going home for medical school classes and I collapsed, went to the hospital, and I was in cardiogenic shock. I had a 16-centimeter mass wrapped around my heart and great vessels, and it was not allowing the blood to go to my brain, to perfuse my brain. That's why I passed out. So they took me to urgent surgery. They took all of the tumor that was compressing those vessels off of those great vessels. They biopsied the tumor. And the next day, this was Thanksgiving of 2000, they came in my room and they said, you have stage 4 cancer. It's a diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. You need to drop out of medical school. We need to start chemotherapy right away. And my a gentleman that I was like friendly with at the time was sitting next to me, and he had asked this question. I was like, "Oh no, I don't want to know that answer." He said, "Well, how long do you think she has?" I'm like, "Who asked that question? How long do you think she has?" Well, they answered it, and what they said is she has 3 months without treatment and probably 20 months with treatment. I'm like, "Whoa, I think I didn't want to hear that. No, no, no. I don't want any statistics here." So, after that delivery, they just dropped it on me, right? And my dad was in the room too, and I remember seeing his face. He's like, "Oh my gosh, this is." I mean, we gave our daughter this very healthy. How does this happen? You start asking all these questions, and so you just learn to accept. Like, you don't blame yourself. Why this happened, and I also didn't ask a lot of questions as to why did it happen. I just, okay, this is intended for me. I don't know what the lesson in this is yet, but I'm going to be in search of that lesson and learn from it. I know everything to do from a lifestyle standpoint. So let me hire the doctors that can take the best care of me so I can take the best care of myself. And that's what I did. I also kept my purpose. I stayed in medical school. I did not drop out of medical school. And so, I really worked closely with my medical team so that I could be the best version of myself during my treatment and not let cancer define me, while still being a good patient, still doing what they asked for me to do. And it worked out just fine. Went on to do chemotherapy. I had to have a bone marrow transplant and I had radiation. But I'll tell you, the one fascinating thing, and I can remember this, like, it's just so vivid in my memory. I remember the one patient in my vision still. My oncologist was very special. I had two oncologists. One was my general and the other was my transplant oncologist. And they both just did so many beautiful, beautiful things for me, very special. And I would say I learned a lot in medical school. I learned so much being a patient. And I got so much love from my doctors then and still to this day. It's just such a gift, the relationship that a doctor has with their patient. It gives me chills to talk about it. But my bone marrow transplant doctor, when they admitted me to the hospital, because you're there for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, you're in there for a long time when you get a bone marrow transplant back then. He had a bike in my room and a bike by the nurse's station. And he said, "Hey, I know you're still gonna do dawn, right?" And I did. I set my alarm every day in the hospital at 4 a.m. I would wake up, I would ride the bike. And he said, everyone's sleeping. You can sneak out, ride the bike that we have for you, sitting in the nurse's station, and you can watch the sunrise prettier. So in Arizona,
Wow.
it was the top floor of Good Samaritan Hospital. That's where I had my bone marrow transplant. That is where City of Hope is. And so every morning at 4 a.m., I would get out, ride my bike during my bone marrow transplant. I remember looking out as I would sneak out of the room, and everyone looked so sick. And it was like they were dying in an effort to stay alive. But I remember just like bouncing around, like, "Hey, I'm here." I felt
Oh.
fine. I attained my vitality without any pause, truly.
The key point here is here you are in med school, a huge thoracotomy to debulk your tumor, make the diagnosis, subsequent chemotherapy. Your bone marrow transplant occurred when, Dawn?
That was in 2001,
In other
March of
words, the
2001.
next year, was it the next year then, basically?
Exactly. It was that
And
following
then
year.
you also had radiation therapy, and that was before the bone marrow transplant?
They ended up doing that at the very end of everything. So they did that the summer of 2001 up until
Wow.
the fall of 2001. And back then it was long radiation course.
So when we think about the trauma to you, had you not been in this fabulous condition to begin with, I don't know many people who would have survived all that. The surgery was obviously a big deal, debulking everything, subsequent chemotherapy, subsequent bone marrow transplant, subsequent radiation therapy. which obviously is going to do damage to what?
Right. The lung tissue, and even to this day, when I do CAT scans, there's extensive fibrosis of
Yep.
my lung tissue, and we do pulmonary function tests, and it shows a restrictive pattern. But because I do, eat a very low inflammatory diet and take good care of myself, I've never smoked, all these behaviors are so important. It keeps that inflammation to an all-time low. So I function like more than the average person, I would say. Uh, and so that's fascinating to know. The body wants to heal itself if you just get out
Yeah.
of the way and respect the body and honor the body and show up for yourself.
Yeah. And you said something else really key. I just posted on this recently on LinkedIn, and that is an anti-inflammatory diet. You want to explain what an anti-inflammatory diet is?
Jay, this is so important. JAMA in 2022, they posted that food is leading cause of death in our country. It
Yep.
is.
Yep.
93% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. This is a major problem. I did a study in our cancer center that showed that 95% of our breast cancer patients do not get the recommended serving of vegetable and fruits a day. That's an easy, that's only 5 servings a day. That's not very hard. And we know if you get enough vegetables and fruits a day, that you improve your risk or your chances, you improve your chances, let's do it that way, of surviving cancer, of surviving heart disease, of surviving any illness, period, including respiratory disease, which was lumped into COVID. We saw this. So an anti-inflammatory diet is get rid of all that ultra-processed foods. Let's start with that. I think sometimes when you start talking about restriction, people get a little defensive, but at the end of the day, your body is not designed to have chemicals. And my entire life, I've never consumed ultra processed food. I've always done a whole food diet. This doesn't mean you need to be vegan, but it means we need to get rid of those fake foods and use foods closer to nature. The next thing is, as I just spoke about the vegetables and fruits, you need to get what your body needs. So you need to get that at a minimum 5 servings of vegetables and fruits a day. So sometimes when I work with patients, I just start there. You know, I, about 91% of women, 95% of men don't get enough fiber. And so getting those vegetables and fruits can help you meet that
Sure.
goal. And fiber is so important. Everyone's so obsessed with protein. And, for those under the age of 65, you're getting enough protein. Over the age of 65, you really do need to focus on it. And of course, if you're an extreme athlete or you just had surgery, you're going through chemotherapy, your your protein goal does increase. But the messaging here is Americans aren't getting enough fiber. None of them. And so we want to be very, very mindful. And when we talk about the anti-inflammatory diet, it's exactly that, getting rid of what causes inflammation and adding more of what can help to augment an anti-inflammatory opportunity and focusing on omega-3 fatty acids. The omega-3 fatty acids that you may get from flaxseed, from walnuts, from fatty fish like salmon. That's another really important thing
Yep.
that I would
Yep.
recommend
Oh,
too.
fantastic. Thank you for giving us that overview. Now, because of the radiation therapy, Dawn, you obviously had not only subsequent fibrosis of your lungs, but it damaged your heart.
So it was about 2 years after my bone marrow transplant. I was given the gift of being able to we were given the gift of growing our family. I became pregnant. And this was in 2002. I found out I was pregnant. I delivered my daughter in 2003 in May, and a few weeks after she was born, I started not to feel well again. I thought for sure the cancer was back. It was the same exact symptoms.
Wow.
But this time the narrative was flipped because now I'm a mom, I'm a wife. I wasn't just during cancer, it was just me, medical student. I could be selfish. I could do whatever I wanted. If I died, it didn't matter. But now everything was different. And so I didn't want to tell anyone anything was wrong with me, but I couldn't even hold my daughter. It was just so hard on me. So again, I went to the hospital. Again, I was in cardiogenic shock. And I thought for sure when they came back in the room, they would tell me, your cancer's back. But instead, they said, we need to do an echocardiogram. And when they're doing the echocardiogram, which is an ultrasound of the heart, they found that my heart ejection fraction, how much the blood was pumping forward, was only 8%, which as a doctor, I've
Well,
never
wait
seen
a
that.
minute. Time out.
Yeah,
That's an eight
single digit.
single digit? My
I
God.
know. I mean, thank God I'm small, right? And thank goodness I was fit. I mean, the reason that this was able to go so long, and looking back, I had the heart failure definitely during my pregnancy. We just didn't know it. You know, I
Wow.
just was so well compensated because I was so cardiovascularly fit going into this. So, of course, at that point, they thought I was going to need an urgent heart transplant. But fortunately, with medications, with cardiac rehab, I got stronger. I was able to go back and finish my fourth year of medical school and then went on to internship residency. And it was just unbelievable that I was able to keep up with all of that. And, I would say around 2015 with my heart failure, this was 2003 to 2015. Heart failure is such a hard disease for young people. Cancer, quite honestly, was a much easier thing for me, but heart failure was very difficult. But I worked full time. I was a mom. I stayed busy. I had deep meaning, purpose in my life. And I just worked very closely with my medical team. I really couldn't overextend myself in anything outside of work. I always ate healthy again. Exercise was really difficult. My exercise was really just walking and being active in my daily activities.
Oh, that's really important. So, how
Yeah.
many years after your initial 8% ejection fraction? What was it, another 15 years until you finally had your heart transplant then?
So I lived with heart failure for 18 years.
18 years. Okay.
18 years. In 2015, I had a near death, or it was around 2015, 2016, I had a near death experience. That was a 4-minute cardiac arrest. And it was around that time that I just really couldn't get stronger. So they knew they were going to likely have to start thinking along the lines of transplantation at that time. Um, but what a gift to be given this second chance at life with a heart. And, I remember waking up from the heart transplant, and it was the first time in 18 years that my body felt warm. You don't realize that when your heart's not beating, the amount of blood to your organs, you just always feel cold. And it was the first time in 18 years I had total clarity of thought. Literally, I had a very complicated heart transplant. They even had to take me back to the operating room and reopen me up because of a hemorrhage from all the radiation damage that happened
Yeah.
during radiation. It's just a complex surgery for past cancer patients, especially back then, the radiation they gave you, which is very different now. But when I woke up out of anesthesia, I had total clarity of thought.
Wow.
It was just a beautiful phenomenon. It was just like this harmonious connection with life. And I just felt my energy was just supercharged. It was truly magical, one could say.
You are so inspirational to not only me, but
Um,
I'm sure everyone who's going to be watching this discussion today and conversation. Dawn, in the middle of all this, a tragedy did strike, didn't it?
it did, Jay. And it's actually the hardest part of my entire journey. And in 2007, literally right in the middle of that, my husband's Lebanese. He had a big family, and every Friday night we would go to a large family dinner. It was what we loved doing. We looked forward to it. And after dinner one Friday night, he just said, "Honey, I'm not feeling good. Go sleep with the baby." Sophia, my daughter, was 5 at the time. The next morning, I woke up at 4 a.m. I do this, done this my whole life, and I was doing some work. Sophia wakes up at 6. It was kind of unusual he wasn't up yet because usually he would be up at 4 a.m. with me, but I didn't think much of it. She says, "Mom, where's Dad?" He said, "Honey, he's just sleeping in." 8 o'clock rolls around, same thing. And I go in to check on him, and he had passed away in his sleep. And, I would say for me, my own personal healthcare adversity was easy. You know, I I I know what to do to take care of myself. I know where to go for strength. But when a tragedy happens outside of your life, you don't even know where to begin. I remember looking for a book like, what do I do? I have a young daughter. Have my own health problem. Where do you start? I was so lost. And this incredibly joyful spirit that I have, it's like that Disney ride, that free fall machine where you fall. That's what happened with my emotional state. It's like, I'm bouncing. I'm like, oh, ready to wake up my husband. And he had died. And I remember that my emotional state just fell. And it was a full year before I could accept any sensory like input. The one thing I remember during this time is music. I couldn't hear music, even in the car. It would just be so much for me to process. It's so hard to describe what a person goes through when they have loss. And this is a time when I became very strong in my faith. I was born in a Catholic family. We went to church on most Sundays. I have belief in Jesus, but I never had a connection to my faith until my husband died. And then I had a reason to believe in heaven and have a deep connection in spirituality, faith, and belief in God. That was critical to all of my healthcare issues, but especially when my husband died. So, it's just so difficult. And I would say that when you have loss, grief, suffering, it's really a time when you can rise above. You just have to look for meaning, which is very, very difficult. But for me, it was that persistence of love. That was my sadness, was because I had love. And I always look for the lesson, or I always look for the positive. Where is the silver lining in this? And it was, I had love. I had the biggest love probably people ever experienced. And so many people will never experience that in their entire life, but at least I had that. So I just gave gratitude to what I had for when I had it. And you just have to keep that memory of that loved one deep in your heart always. But very
Wow.
difficult, very difficult.
So, Dawn, your journey has been absolutely extraordinary, and it is uplifting to everyone. How, as we come near the end of our conversation, what are the take-home messages to the average cancer patient? And based on your experience with nutrition, exercise, what sustains you, what are sort of the bullet points we can share with our audience?
Jay, for me, I just said it right there, is number one for me is belief in something bigger than yourself. If you have belief in something bigger and outside of yourself, you can hand over any worry at any time. The next is clearly acceptance. You can fight whatever diagnosis you're giving. It's kind of like if you're trying to swim against the current, or you can change your course, but the art of acceptance and grace is absolutely critical. And just try to work at living in harmony. You want to be authentic to yourself, but try to rise to that place of acceptance. It's just so important. For me, I took cancer and heart failure and even my husband passing away, and I really tried to reframe it. I tried to find within those lessons that these lessons in life weren't happening to me, that they were happening for me. And there was a definite area of growth that I can learn from every single one of these things. And I became grateful. During this time, my existence just kept ascending like this escalator of a beautiful, harmonious existence. And now I'm in this place of pure bliss. Like I get goosebumps all the time. And so if you can I call them glimmer moments. This is actually true. It's a glimmer moment. These just very sweet, special moments. Look for those, just reframing the cancer, reframing your adversity, whatever that may be, and looking for the hope. That can be very, very difficult, especially if people come from a place of neglect as children. I never had that. I came from a place of love, so it's easy for me to go back to that. But that's the thing that I would recommend that worked for me. And now most people are surprised that I saved it for number 4, but you got to show for yourself. I say eat to live, move to thrive, and connect to flourish. Those are my 3 things. You got to eat healthy, you got to move your body, but the most important thing is love. We have to love one another. We have to love our family. We have to also rely on that support when we're not doing well. It gives other people external meaning in their own life if they can be there to support us. So that connection is so very critical. And the last thing is just stick to your purpose and meaning and do what's you. When you wake up in the morning, why are you waking up? And what is it that when you wake up each morning that just makes you tickle? And really go after those moments. And so that would be my biggest recommendation to people. And that was, I would say, my recipe of what works for me in that order. People are shocked when I put the nutrition number 4, because that's usually what I'm always talking about. But gosh, there's so many other things that are far more important than the lifestyle part of it, I feel.
Okay, well, lifestyle is important, and you are a living example of how important lifestyle is before a diagnosis, during the active diagnosis and active treatment, but particularly, Dawn, in long-term survivorship. And you're a long-term survivor now, and what an extraordinary journey you've had. Well, as we wrap this up, it is truly my honor, and I want to thank Dr. Dawn Mussallem for the privilege of her time today. I would encourage our audience to please join us at cancerfitness.org. At cancerfitness.org, we have other videos, we have written blogs. And remember, as Dr. Dawn just said, keep on moving. Thank you so very much.